Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 87, recording on Monday, June 2nd, a couple hours after I got off the practice field for another OTA's workout in front of the media. It was sunny out there, obviously, as you can see on the side of my head. If you're watching on YouTube, which we appreciate, if you are, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps us out a ton. And we've had a lot of fun growing this show. I'm going to bring you a lot of what I saw today out there. We'll talk about J.J. McCarthy. We'll talk about a bunch of different people. The defense, I was watching a little bit today, talked to a couple of the defenders after practice, even, some receiver thoughts. And then I got, one of the newcomers that caught my eye a little bit. So I'll get into all of that. But before we do, this show is brought to you by First Resource Bank. That's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. You'll start to notice they got branches all over the place, and it's run by really good people who care about the community. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, and the whole crew over at the branch on Washington, who I get to see and catch up with every now and then. I always enjoy doing that. But really good people, really easy to start an account. Information on their branches and how to do that is in the description below. So please go check them out. You will not be disappointed. Someone commented in the last episode and they're like, man, this guy's sniffling like crazy. I think they thought I was on drugs. Nope, just been under the weather for much longer than I would hope to be, as I've waited 7 months for it to be sunny outside, to be on patios, to be out near the lake and doing stuff like that, playing golf. But been sidelined for a little bit with some, sinus that you'll probably hear throughout this show. But I just want to make clear that if I am sniffling or if I am, touching my face, I'm a human. I go through the same health stuff that hopefully you guys aren't. I will say, told my mom, she asked about it. She's like, man, my son's sniffling on the podcast. What's wrong? And I told her I was sick. She said, there's stuff that's going around, it sounds like. I said, Mom, you've said that probably every time that I've been sick for 28 years, which I think is funny. And I just want to bring you guys that because it's something that's, it's been on my mind. But we'll get right into what I saw today. And then I took some questions on social media, on Twitter from you guys. And a lot of them were roster related, some transactional stuff. So we'll get right into that. After I give you just the unfiltered view of what I saw today. All right, here we go. We'll start with the quarterback. So, we might, here's the way I'm thinking about this. We're going to do shows every week from now into training camp, throughout training camp, into the season. And really until that first game in Chicago on Monday night against the Bears and against Ben Johnson, against Caleb Williams, you guys are going to be curious. How did JJ look? And I talked about this last episode, and I talked about it with Paul Allen, but I don't chart passes because to me, you get into, there's just so many different variables of why a guy looks how he looks on any of these given days that you want to give grace and not put too much or paint with too broad a brush with a June 2nd practice. I will start by saying, did JJ look as good as he did Wednesday when I came on here and I was probably raving a pretty good bit about him? No, I didn't think so. And we can get into a ton of the reasons. It was really windy outside, so I'll just start by saying that. I was joking around, and I think there were other media members and some of the PR staff laughing at me, but how golfers, before they tee off on a windy day, they pick up the grass and they toss it into the sky, and they're like, which way did it blow? How much is the wind blowing? I was doing that out of practice to try to assess the wind as I was also evaluating JJ's throws. But on a serious note, the short answer, if you came at me and you said, Alec, did JJ look as good as you talked about Wednesday? I'd say no. And there were a few plays anecdotally that stick out in my mind, but I just didn't think, the accuracy was as good. The timing didn't feel as rhythmic, but it the headline that I don't want you guys to take, JJ doesn't, I want it to be JJ, he didn't look as good. And I'll say Wednesday, I was pretty impressed by just what I saw from him. So, and you never know. And I said this on Wednesday's podcast, and I've said it in the past, but like you never know like what might have been affecting him. Again, it could be the win. It also could be maybe Kevin O'Connell and Josh McCown were throwing him lengthier play calls than they ever had. And that's not something you'd ever know standing atop a hill just watching from the perspective that I was watching. So it's important for me in my role to mention that. I also think like you never know if JJ decided today, like, hey, this is going to be a day where I really try to fit into tight windows, or I really try to throw at a certain, at a certain spot. Like we didn't talk to JJ today. And even if we had talked to him, I'm not sure if he would ever be that forward of walking us through his entire thought process, trotting out to the practice field. And I've said on this podcast and in writing, like I think it's really good to take the mindset of trial and error when the only people watching you this time of year are people like me with glasses and notepads taking notes from a top of just like there's no pressure. So why not make mistakes now? Why not get crazy, get creative, and try to do certain things now so that when the season happens, when he's in preseason games, when he's throwing in front of the fans in training camp, when he's in joint practices against the Patriots or the Rams, like why make those mistakes then if you can make them now in front of very few people? So it's just as I evaluate how a guy looks, and it's every position, but especially quarterback, which you guys and even me, I mean, we're going to be conditioned to react to strongly. That's just how this sport works. It's the nature of how the media business works. Those reminders for me are integral to talk about. Not every show, but I specifically just knowing how I want to do the job. Like I want to be very open about. I think so often in my role, like you can act like you know everything, and there's just a lot at times that is uncertain that you have to be willing to admit. So there's that. I mean, the play that, like I think, if you asked me to remember the second OTA practice before JJ's first season starting, and like you were trying to jog my memory, you'd probably say, well, like it was the practice where he threw that interception to Isaiah Rodgers, and the play was essentially, it was a crossing route to Jordan Addison toward the left sideline, and JJ kind of progressed, if I'm not mistaken, from the right to the left, and he got to that spot where Jordan Addison was angled kind of towards the corner, toward the left sideline. JJ tried to feather a pass up and over Isaiah Rodgers to Jordan Addison. Isaiah Rodgers undercut the pass, intercepted it, and the defense does what this defense does when they turn the ball over. They hoot, they holler, they sprint, they hop atop one another. And then after the pass, while the defense was celebrating crazily around Isaiah Rodgers, who I'm going to get to at some point in this show, who I talked to today, Kevin O'Connell walked up to JJ, and they were having a brief little teaching moment. But I wrote this in my story for tomorrow morning, which I want you guys to read, and which I'm going to talk about a little bit in depth later on the show. I called that a teaching moment, but you never know. I mean, it could have been Kevin O'Connell going up to JJ and saying, hey, I'm really glad you tried that throw there. Hey, it was great that you progressed to that point in the play because it means you picked up something on the defense. Like there are those little nuggets that in my job, those little conversations, those anecdotes that I think bring you as deep as possible. Like it's my job to uncover that stuff, but there are just practices and times where it's difficult to do that, and that was one of them. So that play stands out in my mind. I mean, I can also flip it the other way. Like there were, if I wanted to be Mr. Rosie all the time, like I will say there were some just sideline deep balls, like you're just classic 7-on-7 streaking down the sidelines where I thought JJ was leading guys down the field 40 yards, 50 yards down the field. And I think among the questions, and I've gone over this as well, but that we've asked about JJ, that probably you guys who really study it or evaluate it to the point at which you're listening to my podcast about it, you've probably wondered or asked, it's some of the footwork stuff. It's some of does he overstride? It's the torque he puts on his arm. It's the layering down the field. But then one of the maybe questions, if you want to put it that way, is like arc on deep balls down the field. And I thought like he threw a bunch today that I thought like, you had Jordan Addison lunging out for it, not just like slowing down to make sure he catches the pass. And so that was positive. I mean, there was a red zone sequence where it's obviously coaches will always tell you red zone, things move fast, it's tight windows, you got to be quick, you got to process fast, all of that. One of the first throws that JJ made in this red zone period was like on the back line, kind of outstretched to TJ Hockenson, and TJ didn't come down with the pass. I didn't get a good replay on it. You don't get replays in this live setting, which is unfortunate, but it reminded me a little bit in terms of like ball location to, you guys may remember in Detroit in the first half, there was an over the middle pass in that late, the game of all games ever to be a game, where Sam Darnold like tried this streaking down the seam TJ Hockenson ball, and it might have been a little overthrown, but I also felt like TJ could have maybe caught it. So there was a throw like that and a very quick decision by JJ in the red zone today that TJ didn't come down with. But if he comes down with that throw, like again, and then they're celebrating, like maybe that cues like my mind, the other media members' minds to be more positive about it in some way. Excuse me. There were some of the red zone, like there was a red zone throw where JJ kind of progressed, and then he tried to pass to Justin Jefferson that was behind him. So there were like some ball location stuff like that. That was a little iffy. Like there was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a throw where it was kind of low and kind of like a dirt ball to Aaron Jones. But again, like, let me just make it very clear. It's a June 2nd practice. I still don't think he looked like bad. It's not like he was throwing the ball to the other team the whole time. And it's also not like it was very windy out there. That definitely affects guys. So I'm not going to make anything about it, but I just know you guys are going to be curious about how he looks every time we get to watch him and you guys don't. So it's incumbent upon me in doing this job to be as just straightforward and factual as I can without overreacting, because that's just, you don't want to do. It would be foolish on my part to make a big deal out of a June 2nd practice. So that's what I'd say, but it'll be interesting. Like, I'm looking forward to it. That's some of the fun part with this is next week when I'm out at the field for mandatory minicamp, how does JJ look? And then how does he look in training camp compared to these times? Like, I had this conversation with somebody, but last year during the spring, JJ McCarthy, he wasn't exceptional. Like, I remember ESPN, I think, displayed this throw that he had where he like threw it behind Josh McCown and it went into the bushes, and people like that got put on social media and people were going nuts about it and all that. So like this time of year, it's not the most competitive juices environment. And it is more of the best way to sum up what these practices are. And I'm going to get into this in a second. It's like being on the driving range. Like you watch, that's the best way. Like if you, before the Masters, let's just say, I mean, if you're not a golf guy, or girl, and you're listening to this, and the Masters is the biggest tournament of the year. But there are times before the tournament starts, or even days before the round starts, where the cameras will be on guys at the range, and you might see Rory McIlroy striping iron shots and looking great, or you might see Rory McIlroy like grunting or like cringing at certain shots, and then he may get in the round that day in the tournament and absolutely blow it out of the water after looking bad on the range, or look amazing after, or look terrible after looking great on the range. So like that, this is the range time of being a quarterback in the NFL. And so it lends itself to trial and error. It lends itself to taking things slower, to not competing. And so like to react to how Rory looks on the range on Friday or Sunday of the Masters, it would be silly. That's the way to look at this. And that the segue there for me is like people, I get it from friends and family all the time. Like, how's that person looking at OTAs? And like, I think sometimes I get it because I get to be out here and you guys would kill to be out here. And that it's something I have in my mind every day I drive out to the facility, especially this time of year, or every day I'm writing or any of that. Like the gratitude for me of getting to do this job, I don't take for granted. But I just want to make clear, like these OTAs practices for a while, it's just stretching, it's jogging, it's quarterbacks like weaving in and out of cones, drills, just very like rudimentary stuff. And then they get into some 7-on-7, which gets a little more competitive, but sometimes there's defense out there and they're testing their own coverages and they're trying different stuff. And then even when it gets to be like the offensive line, the defensive line get into play, like there are a lot of reps where the players are jogging. It's just jog through reps, get a feel, walk through type reps. And they can be very valuable to the players, specifically who are trying to learn systems and learn schemes and all that. But from a media standpoint, like to make a lot of it, or like when friends ask me, what'd you see? I always say, like, I'm going to be very open with you. And you guys are listening to this show every week. So I feel the need to say to you guys, like, you're not seeing a ton here, multiple times to where you really have a good feel of what you're seeing. Like just during the season, until I see the all 22 of specific plays, there's only a certain level of conviction I have. But in this environment, like you're just not seeing enough to make any rash opinions or judgments that at least in my role, in my opinion, with the way I view the job, are relevant enough to make a big kerfuffle about. That's probably not the right word. But it felt awesome to say. So that's just what I want to say. We'll segue immediately to Isaiah Rodgers. So he didn't practice Wednesday, and I mean, I wasn't concerned at all. Like it's a voluntary OTA. Guys have family stuff. There's a lot going on right now. It is, in fact, voluntary OTA season this summer. But I did want to see Isaiah Rodgers up close, what he looked like, and I mentioned that interception, which was impressive. But I really want to start. I mean, this guy comes out on the field with like electric yellow, the color, electric yellow, think very bright yellow, gloves and shoes. And it reminded me, or not reminded me, but it was something it's something I wanted to say. I mean, on last week's podcast, I said that when guys wear smaller numbers, like Jalen Naylor switching from 83 to 1, they usually look faster. They look more fluid. And then I said this on KFAN. You guys might have been listening to the segment with Eric Nordquist last Friday. It was very sick, so I was probably saying some crazy stuff that day. But I repeated that statement, and I mean, the text line was crushing me. The preposterous statement tournament added that quote as an entry, even though science backs it. So I'm just gonna, but I have an addendum to it, or another layer of thought for me when cornerbacks, receivers wear accessories that pop, like lime shoes, like lime gloves. In Isaiah Rodgers' case, electric yellow gloves and shoes. It just adds a layer of swag, of aura. Like it almost makes me think of like NFL Street, the video game, where when you like there were certain accessories you could add to the create a player that added to their speed, to their agility, their acceleration. And it feels like that sometimes watching guys. And Isaiah Rodgers today, speaking on Monday, June 2nd, definitely had that effect. On a more like relevant note and more what you guys are tuning in for note, thought Isaiah Rodgers, I mean, the athleticism stands out. The ball skills obviously showed up on that interception. But just like he doesn't look when the Vikings signed him as the first guy in free agency, and at that point the Vikings had been pretty quiet in free agency, and I think I started to get texts from people like, what is going on? Why aren't they doing anything? They talked a big game about wanting to add to the trenches and do all this stuff, and yet our only player to show for it right now is Isaiah Rodgers. What the heck is going on? Well, obviously the Vikings rectified those concerns, or they made good on those concerns very quickly with as many players as they signed and paid for over the days that followed that. But when they signed Isaiah Rodgers, one of the aspects to him that was curious to me is like from a measurable standpoint, he is not big. I mean, he was listed maybe around 6 foot, around 170 pounds. And I remember talking to people internally, like he plays bigger than that. He's competitive at the catch point. The ball skills overcome some of that. Like the lack of size doesn't scare him in terms of trying to play physical on the field. And you could see that like watching the tape. I went back and watched the Eagles game last year against the Rams, and Isaiah Rodgers was matched up with Puka Nacua, and he was physical and he was aggressive and all that. But seeing him in person, like he looked much bigger to me than 6 foot 170. And I talked to him afterwards, and he said a couple things that were interesting. He's like, the Flores scheme is like incredibly different, excuse me, to Vic Fangio's system. Which is obvious. I mean, it's not crazy. It's not a crazy thing to say for anyone who's watched both defensive systems and who's kind of, knows the ins and outs of Vic Fangio is very too high safety shell, do different things at a too high, very like it's a cerebral system. It requires a lot of thought. Whereas Isaiah Rodgers' like flow system is more like you're thriving off instincts. You're finding the ball. You're creating turnovers, and you could tell just talking to him like how much fun he's having. And when the Vikings kind of like have showed some base personnel stuff, the cornerbacks out there have been him. Today it was him and Byron Murphy, and then when they were in nickel personnel, which is for those who are, for the uninitiated, listen to this, that's when you have 5 defensive backs on the field. And when they had 3 corners, it was Byron Murphy, it was Isaiah Rodgers, and Jeff Okudah. And that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure to the questions that people toss me on social media, one of you guys' probably biggest curiosities is Jalen Ramsey. Is that possible? And like, I'm never going to rule out something like that where there's familiarity with the staff. Like there are at least 5 staffers who were on that 2021 Rams team that won the Super Bowl when Jalen Ramsey was the all-pro player. I mean, there's also like, you can imagine Jalen Ramsey, and as versatile as he is, fitting just like a glove with Brian Flores. But like, I mean, looking at the corners that were out there today, and again, Byron Murphy Jr. have a lot of respect for, trust in. Isaiah Rodgers, I mean, the way this Vikings defensive staff views him, it's hard not to believe in their vision. But I did kind of wonder as I'm standing out there like, man, if one of those guys goes down, and let's say Byron Murphy goes down, well, that, I mean, you're in trouble, obviously, from the outset that happens. But then you're relying on Isaiah Rodgers and Jeff Okudah, and then maybe Mekhi Blackman. Let's say Isaiah Rodgers goes down, then it's Byron Murphy, Jeff Okudah, Mekhi Blackman. I mean, that secondary, that cornerback crew for a team that is spending upwards of $357 million for this year's roster in cash, which is the highest that any team in the NFL is spending for this season. I mean, it'd be kind of difficult to imagine those 3 being the 3 that you're relying on. And this is where I teased this earlier, but I really want you guys to go to The Athletic on Tuesday morning and read the full story that I wrote on Jalen Ramsey, the conversation, how it kind of places this cornerback room in the crosshairs. I'll say that Mekhi Blackman, who I spoke to today alongside Doogie, who obviously does TV here, Mekhi was like, I've heard what people are said about our cornerback room, like, and then Doogie replied, like, what have you heard? And he's like, y'all know. And essentially, I mean, he's seen on social media the skepticism probably from a lot of you guys and even some of us in the media of, I mean, that you're relying on a lot from these current cornerbacks for a team that has the expectations that this one does. And I wrote kind of a whole story about this again for Tuesday with some thoughts from Harrison Phillips and just some insight about Jalen Ramsey. And so I want you guys to go read this. But again, as I'm standing out there and I'm watching, that cornerback crew, I am thinking to myself, like, they better be right in their evaluation of what Isaiah Rodgers is going to be, of what Jeff Okudah can be. excuse me, of what Mekhi Blackmon might look like coming back from injury and all of that, because once Jalen Ramsey is acquired by another team, or once he's cut and signed by another team, the available talent is probably not going to rise anywhere close to the level that Jalen Ramsey offers or provides. So you better be sure that would not be a move that you want to make right now if that's the route that it indeed goes. Some other observations from what I saw today, and we'll run through these pretty quick here. I mentioned like the nickel groups type stuff, and I never want to overreact to this stuff, because last year or 2 years ago, for example, Joejuan Williams, who was this very big corner that the Vikings had, who was a former, I think, second-round pick from the Patriots. Like, there was a day out at practice where he was like running with the first team a little bit, and then obviously like weeks later he was no longer here or involved at all. But like on the starter side of the field, and they usually run two different sides of the field. One group's the starters, one group is more of the developmental group and roster. It was interesting to see, like, at the times that Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave weren't out there on the defensive line. You saw Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, who the Vikings drafted this past draft, obviously from Georgia, the player with upside that they really liked. You saw him like taking some snaps on the starter side of the field. I thought that was interesting. Jalen Redmond was obviously there. So was Levi Drake Rodriguez a little bit. It was good to see him mixing in. I saw a lot of Dallas Turner off the ball, which is, again, it's something that going to have to see that play out over time to really expect the Vikings to do that a ton. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe there's a defensive world this year where opposing teams are like, man, we don't want to turn the ball over as much as we did against this team last year. We threw a ton against them. We'll run the ball more this time around. Maybe that allows the Vikings to get in heavier personnel and play with a guy like Dallas Turner off the ball. It's kind of an interesting thought. I thought Eric Wilson was flying around. He was everywhere wearing his old number. And I just, like, at one point it was like, who is that guy out there? Oh, Eric Wilson. Not surprising to see him flying around. There was some man coverage mixed in defensively at times, which I always love to see. I don't know. They don't want us to talk a lot about probably like formations and coverages. And to me, to say there's man coverage doesn't do very much, but it's always good to see it. I just have wondered, as they've gotten younger at corner, if mixing in some more man and being more able to do that, knowing that the guys will recover better than a Stephon Gilmore or Shaq Griffin would have recovered last year, if that becomes more of a possibility and a change up. I still don't think I think the days of Brian Flores running man full time, 50% of the time, the way he did in Miami, I think those days are gone. I think the fastball for Brian Flores here in Minnesota is the zone coverages, the non-traditional Tampas, the cover fours that turn into palms, all of that crazy intricate stuff that we'll tap on Cody Alexander for at some point before the season. Like, that's probably going to be the fastball. But I kind of, like, the way I describe it is, if I'm the pitching coach, I would probably this pitcher and Brian Flores knows much more than the pitching coach. But it's like, you almost would say, hey, let's increase the usage of the changeup a little more to have that in the opposing teams and quarterbacks' minds more than it's been. And then the last little observation for me, and like, I don't mind if this gets aggregated, because like, he probably deserves some praise, but I thought Max Brosmer, in the limited reps that I saw him out there, both in the red zone and in the open field, like, I thought he threw the ball well. Thought his decision-making looked pretty sound and quick and stuff. There's just something about that guy that has interested me, even watching him, like, for the Gophers this past year. And you guys who are Gophers fans have probably watched him much more than I have, and you may be rolling your eyes or screaming, or maybe you're happy. Like, I'd be curious to hear what you think of me saying this. But I just, like, no agenda, out there watching guys, I thought he looked pretty good today. So just thought I'd mention that, and we will get to the questions right about now. I didn't script any of these. I got about 27 of them, so I'm not going to take all of that. I'm not going to take all of them. If I miss any, again, toss them in the comments, and I'll try to get them via YouTube or Spotify or anything. Jason asked favorite candy bar. I don't know if this counts as a bar, but Reese's Cups is my favorite. I mean, like if someone buys like a package for me, it's a very big problem. I gotta like hide them in the cabinets because those things are just absolutely ridiculous. You put those in the freezer, get them cold. I mean, we're starting to have real problems. You mix in the Reese's with the Jersey Mike's multiple trips during the season, still waiting on the Jersey Mike sponsorship. But you mix and again, I mean, the workouts are going to, you really like my regimen of health starts to really come into question. But that was my favorite question of the social media. So I thought I'd get to that first. Purple Persuasion, the account that many adore. What's going on in the cornerback room next to behind Byron Murphy Jr.? We talked a lot about this, obviously, early in the podcast, but it was a lot of Isaiah Rodgers today, and I thought he looked really good. Jeff Okudah, the length is unmistakable, just a big body. And I've always kind of liked Okudah maybe more than PFF or I think consensus. Like, I'm not going to act like he's some elite corner, but I will never get out of my mind the game that he played against Justin in 2022, where he was really physical, and obviously he had help and double teams and triple teams over the top. But if there is a stat that is going to maximize a guy's skill set and where they would fit best, like I think it's this one, and the fact that excuse me, they prioritized Jeff Okudah, and they did. I mean, from the outset of free agency, that sounded like that was going to happen. They've just proven it time and time again, this personnel department and the defensive staff, that when they identify guys, that they usually have a vision for them, and that's probably the best path for a guy succeeding. So that's what I'd say. I mean, Mekhi Blackmon mixed in a little bit. I still think that the training staff is being a little kind of like cautious with the runway for him. Not that he can't handle the full runway. I just think they want him healthy for training camp and at his optimal kind of pace and ability. So, and then I've always liked Dwight McGlothern. I've been pretty open about that. The one name that I will say that I would just keep in mind, this undrafted signee from Iowa, from Utah, Zamiah Vaughn. See, if we had a great editing, production platform, that would be edited out to make me look better. But you get the full unfiltered view here on the Alec Lewis Show. Zamiah Vaughn from Utah. He just looks really good out there. Looks comfortable out there. Looks like he's seeing it. I've got my eyes on that guy. Is what I'd say. Vikings fan page, any updates on a Josh Metellus extension possibly on the horizon? I've not heard anything. He's represented by Drew Rosenhaus. They have a great relationship with the Vikings. So at some point, you got the Van Ginkel extension done. You got Kwesi's extension done. For me, I just kind of like Josh has been out there. Josh, you guys see him out in the community and stuff. You see his presence. And then I think like with this safety room, when you have Theo, you have Harrison Smith, you have Josh Metellus. Like I think you're gonna need Josh Metellus. He's still young. Like to me, that's just kind of a no-brainer. It's just a matter of when. But haven't heard a ton about it of late. Dan P., what is the outlook for Dallas Turner coming into 2025? It's a great question. We're going to do something in depth on this over at The Athletic at some point. So stay tuned for that. But I think he definitely looks bigger. Like Dallas Turner definitely looks like he's put on some very good weight. And I mentioned he played a little bit off the ball, or I've seen him a little bit off the ball. He looks pretty good. Look, I know about Dallas Turner. Talking to people around him, there is an intense level of motivation, and has been from the time that last season ended, to be the guy that I think everyone wants him to be. Let's see. Someone asked me, I can't remember the person's name, in a reply the other day to talk a little bit about the Vikings cap situation for 2026. So I'm just going to pull this up on Over the Cap. Right now for 2025, it looks like the Vikings have about $18 million in effective cap space for 2025. And you guys have asked a ton over are they saving it for the big move? I mean, I think they're saving it for if in the event that they need that money for now, a year that they are very invested in, obviously, like they have it. And then if they need to roll it over, or if no opportunity to help this team makes sense and they need to roll it over, then they'll be able to. And that's $18 million. So right now, according to Over the Cap for 2026, the Vikings are $53 million over the cap. That's a lot. That's like third most in the NFL. And so you guys might be saying, what? We already spent all our cap space? Well, they obviously spent a lot on the signings that they've made this offseason. But what I would say is not only could you roll over $18 million, which would then drop you, if my math brain is working right now, to around $35 million over the cap. And then there are tons of ways to find themselves with some room. And I'll just run through some of them. And this is straight from Over the Cap. So it's something you guys could look up. But like Brian O'Neill, his contract will probably need to be reworked, or that'll become a question probably at some point. Like, let's say Brian O'Neill's not on the team. I mean, I hope he's on the team because I love talking to him, and I know they hope he's on the team because of what he's meant to the performance of the offensive line and to the locker room. But like his contract is to where if he like is traded pre-June or cut pre-June, like next year, like you save around $20 million in cap space. So I mean, you're starting to get pretty close back to the Mendoza, not the Mendoza line, but the equator per se. Then like Jonathan Grenard, he's a guy like you could roll over probably close to $13 million into the next year. You could rework that contract. TJ Hawkinson, you could roll over probably close to $10 million. Justin Jefferson, you could roll over close to $20 million. Andrew Van Ginkel, you roll over close to $11 million. And obviously, if you roll over the way I'm talking about it, like that has an effect. That would mean you got to do something in 2027. But like this is the way kind of like the teams with young quarterbacks, teams with quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not comparing anybody to Patrick Mahomes right now, but like this is kind of how they operate. You then have flexibility of long-term contracts to be able to get creative. Like Christian Darrisaw, roll over $10 million. Like Josh Metellus, that's a contract like currently that we talk about. Jonathan Allen, I mean, like there's a lot of these contracts that eventually become that's where you rely on Rob Brzezinski and Emily Battis to get very creative. But what I would say at a base level is like obviously the Vikings aren't going to have the space they had this past year. They spent a heck of a lot of it on a lot of players, but there's ways to get pretty creative in terms of managing that. So that answers the question that somebody wanted me to talk about the other day. I'll run through a couple. Let's see here. Someone asked, Diggs was identified early in 2015. Any whispers on rookies creating buzz? I mean, I mentioned Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, the snaps that it looked, or the spot starting kind of not starting. Let me be very clear. Being on the starter side of the field, that's notable to me. And then Zemiah Vaughn is a guy for sure. Kobe King's getting some pretty good run, and I'm just not surprised. I mean, they loved him in drafting him in the 6th round at a position they didn't really need. Like, they obviously loved him. Someone asked early thoughts on Sam Howell. I haven't watched him enough. The zip on JJ's arm stands out by comparison, but that's about all I've got for now. He did make a throw, I will say, last Wednesday in the indoor, and there were a couple players I won't name that like gave me like a dang. So that's what I'll say. Carl Johnson, if and when Flores leaves for a head coaching gig, who are the prime candidates in house to replace him? I think the names, and I've talked about them before, the two names stand out immediately would be Durante Jones, who's in charge of the secondary, and then Mike Saravo, the off-ball linebackers coach. Probably the sneaky name would be like Thad Bogardus, who they shifted to coach the edge rushers this year. Thad was in Los Angeles for a long time, and I just think he's got a lot to him, and is pretty savvy. So I'd mention him. And then Marcus Dixon, defensive line coach, seems like he's done a pretty good job so far. So I'd mention him. Masaki asks, how's the run game looking? Haven't seen enough of it. Jordan Mason looks gigantic, and I wrote about him for Monday, so go check that out. Let's see. Alex Berger, is there a logjam at receiver after Jefferson and Addison? Who do you see getting receiver 4 reps among Naylor, Felton, and Moore? Haven't seen anything of Rondale Moore to talk about. So I hope he'll be back for training camp, and if he is, we'll see. Ty Felton, he's interesting. Like, he's long, and he's definitely got long strides. But for me, I mean, Jalen Naylor is still the guy, very much the guy there. I think there's like this perception externally that like Ty Felton's just going to take Jalen Naylor. Like, I just don't see it like that at all. So that's what I'd say. Jalen Ramsey, again, please read the story at The Athletic on Tuesday. That's where you'll get the most Jalen Ramsey, most well-formed Jalen Ramsey thoughts. But like, for a lot of reasons, it makes sense to me. From the money perspective, it would tax the future even more. But when you're as invested in the present as they are right now, maybe like you don't want to look back. The thing that I keep coming back to, you don't want to look back and be like, man, we were so invested in that year. And if we just had another elite corner, it's like, well, that was an opportunity. And if all it cost was a 4th round pick, knowing the hit rates on 4th round picks, that'd be tough. Now, in the same breath, if that tax future salary cap, if you're trying to accumulate draft capital after trading so much of it away over the years, I get the arguments. And if another team's willing to trade something much more, I get that as well. That'll do it for episode 87 of the Alec Lewis Show. We'll be back later this week with a guest that I'm looking forward to talking to. Hope that gave you a pretty good feel of the second practice in front of the media for OTAs. Any other questions you got, toss them in the comments section on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, the like button. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, you can rate, follow, do all that good stuff, and we appreciate it. I've said this in the past. If you have any ad inquiries, we'll listen. AlecLewis54@gmail.com. Toss those my way, your business, and I'll support it as best I can, specifically if it's in the local community. If you're not supporting at First Resource Bank, please go check them out. And then, keep locked in over at The Athletic. A lot of stories to come, some interesting stuff over the course of this week and into the next few weeks. We'll be back later this week. Appreciate you guys being here. That will do it for episode 87 of The Alec Lewis Show.